Hello, I'm Sarah Wright,
And I'm Zach Ward.
and today we're going to talk about our research on the monetization of YouTube and subsequent impacts on the public sphere. And I'm going to hand it over to Zach for our introduction.
So we started kind of the foundation of this is this idea of Habermas's public sphere of members of society getting together to debate, to use intellect, logic, and reason to talk issues out and formulate public opinion. So he traced the structural transformation of those public spheres over time, and that's much changed now with a much different culture, much different kind of characterization of society, where we have a much more active participatory culture, and many more platforms and entry points into the discussion, such as YouTube. Now YouTube is monetized. There are ways to make money in a capitalist structure, much different from Habermas's ideas, which were a little more grounded in Marxist ideas. So we wanted to explore how monetization might have played any kind of part in that transformation to a current public sphere, and if it could even be considered a public sphere.
So the research questions we're looking to address are: in what ways does the monetization of social media sites like YouTube challenge this notion of the public sphere? And does capitalism enhance or inhibit the ability of these new media platforms such as YouTube to truly represent a public sphere? The communication theories we're going to apply are public sphere and participatory culture.
So Habermas's public sphere, he first observed these back in the 18th century, in the Enlightenment period in Europe. We had very wealthy, elite members of society who would get together in public places and talk about issues and formulate public opinion. And they did this to ultimately preserve democracy, to kind of show the government that they have a voice. They would, in a sense, also control the media because they're controlling the message by speaking on behalf of everyone. When you move into Henry Jenkins' writings of participatory culture, the 20th, 21st century, you have a much more active audience. You have a much more inclusive audience, much different makeup of the public than what Habermas describes. You have just free expression of thought, allegedly via the internet and sites like YouTube. And so then the question becomes, if in Habermas's public sphere, the media was controlled or owned by the elite, who owns and controls that now? Because, who owns the internet is a little trickier of a question to answer. It's a much more gray area.
One of the effects of this new participatory culture we find ourselves in with the emergence of new media platforms is what we call cyber utopianism. And that's a belief that the internet has emancipated individuals from gatekeepers like governments and huge media conglomerates. It suggests that the power has been taken away from the oppressors and handed over to the oppressed themselves to create for the first time what many consider a truly free and pro-democracy environment. However, there are authors such as Meredith and Morozov that look at cyber utopianism as more of a flawed concept. And in their article, they did a case study on the White Revolution, which was a social media organization movement that was founded by Ela Clishin. And through the use of Facebook, he organized a large anti-Putin demonstration. And it was considered by many very, very successful and proof that now there is a space where the individual truly has a voice. The big criticism and takeaway, though, is that it was a very short-lived utopianism in that the state themselves quickly realized what a valuable tool these social media platforms can be, and now are themselves using them to create content, control messaging, and spread propaganda and misinformation. The monetization aspect itself of YouTube calls into a question this whole scale of Habermas's traditional Marxism or capitalization. Obviously, when monetization and compensation is involved, that tends to move one more towards a capitalistic end of the spectrum. However, YouTube uses things like manual claiming tools that basically censor or take down content that they find in violation of fair use or copyright violations. There have also been multiple disputes on compensation for things like fan fiction, fan produced content. As those videos go viral and advertisers want to advertise on them, who gets that compensation? Does that belong to the creator of the content, the fan culture, or should the monetization and compensation really go to the big producers and media conglomerates that consider it their intellectual property?
Yeah, so that led us into looking at some more modern writings on Habermas's idea and this idea of the public sphere from Richard Bernstein, who sort of put aside some of the criticisms of the public sphere under Habermas's original tenets, and then looked more at what does this idea promise. And as Sarah just discussed, how does this, how this ties into Bernstein is this idea of if there's money at stake and there's a complex system of how that money is made and spread, is there a potential for manipulation? Is public opinion manipulated? Is the expression of thought suppressed, censored, or manipulated? And YouTube is a site that offers lots of entry points for people, for lots of different people, but is freedom of expression, democracy truly present there when there is a capitalist structure of money exchanging hands, and then big corporations being able to influence the thoughts that are shared and that they put their dollars behind? Building on that, Robert McChesney is a media scholar who writes extensively about capitalism and how capitalism on the internet could potentially be destroying democracy effectively. He says that about 75% of all global spending on advertising ends up in just about 20 different corporations' pockets. In Habermas's view of a public sphere, there was a small group of people, elites, who controlled media. We can see some crossover there. It may look a little bit different, where instead of wealthy individuals, you have wealthy corporations. But if this internet was supposed to set us free, was supposed to be some sort of utopia, supposed to be some place of free expression of thought, is money clouding that? Do we truly have a democratic place where we can express idea freely?
So in conclusion, we found that various factors kind of move that needle from Habermas's traditional ideas of the public sphere, which were based more in Marxism, to the monetization aspect, moving it a little bit more towards capitalism. But once again, we see with censorship, disputes over content and compensation, who really owns these social media platforms? Who really, in the end, has the control if they're able to compensate at will and block or censor content at will?
Yeah, so is it a public sphere? That's all relative ultimately. Yes, there's the opportunity for debate. The site certainly does foster those original tenets of Habermas's ideas. But the monetization aspect of it, as we said, really does at the very least call into question, is it truly free? Is it truly a place where everyone can get together and openly share ideas that are equally heard?
Thank you very much.